It's time for the guest speaker chat.
Hello and good evening. Today we have a really interesting guest, Duke L. Durham, and I will give him a slight introduction, and if anything's wrong here, I apologise and you can correct me later. But anyway, Duke is a full-time spoken word poet. He uses spoken word poetry and rap to express his thoughts on many topics, including our society today, sports, but also diabetes, mental health, and OCD. He is a passionate advocate in all these areas. Duke was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 5 years ago. He is a very active individual who enjoys CrossFit and gained a degree in sports coaching, later followed by a master's in creative writing. He says he uses poetry and sport as therapy and to relate to others. Some of you may remember him and know him from his talk at TAD earlier in the year. So welcome, Duke, and I hope I got that right.
Thank you so much. That's a lovely introduction and an even better jingle. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. So we'll crack on, and we will start with what is affectionately known as the 90-second question round. But it always takes a lot longer than 90 seconds. But it's sort of like quick fire questions. So we might talk a little bit, but we'll go into some of the subjects in more detail later. So,
Sounds
see how
good.
we go. It's a good start. So how would you describe your occupation?
I would describe it as rewarding, meaningful, free, and impactful.
And there can't be many, or maybe this is my imagination, spoken word poets full time around, are there?
Oh, I don't know.
You've never Googled.
It's one of those interesting sort of things that all my mates will be like, "Oh, I never thought you could actually have a job as a poet."
I know. I find it really fascinating. We
Yeah,
had a
really.
chat before this, and I was just like, "Oh wow!" Okay,
Yeah, I'm
so
really blessed to be able to do what I love as a passion and as a job. Yeah, really fortunate.
So when were you diagnosed, and how old were you at the time?
I was diagnosed in 2018, January the 18th, and I was 23. Did you say where was I?
Sorry?
Did you say where was I at the time, or how old?
No, just how old you were.
Yeah.
So do you still finger prick, or do you use sensors?
I use the Libra 2 at the moment.
Okay, that's good. And if you still finger prick these days, or when you did finger prick, do you change your lancet every time?
Absolutely not.
I never understand why they give us 100 years supply in one box.
I know. Obviously, it's a very bad habit. I'm not going to tell people to do what I do, but I'll just be transparent. Then absolutely not.
Oh no, I think you're with the majority of us. Do you use insulin, pens, or pump?
Still on the pens for me.
Okay, that's interesting. And what are your symptoms for when you're hypo or hyper?
Hypo, usually start to feel a sort of internal shake or an internal fatigue or weakness. I don't know. It's quite hard to describe. And then if it gets really bad, extremely agitated, and then I begin to sweat. I think that's really it, really.
And do you get symptoms when you're hyper?
Not as far as I know, really. I think when I'm hyper, it's the only thing I can really put my finger on is just lethargy, really. Other than that, I couldn't really say there's many symptoms.
No, you're the same as me, but some people can feel their hypers as well. And I find I have to be really high before I, realise something's up with that. And what is your go-to hypo treatment?
I actually really like glucogel.
No.
People seem to really not like it. I just really like it. I don't know why.
like the clear.
To this day, which is the big thing, I first got diagnosed. I've always played a lot of sport, and I always had this thing in my head that I want to reach my full potential. What can my body do? I think till this day is thinking that what if I never actually reach my full potential? Now that I've got type 1 diabetes.
You might be at your potential. Do you know what I mean? You don't know
Completely,
if it's making a difference or not, isn't it? It's sort of like you never know the alternative.
Yeah, which is why it's something that I think I battle with a little bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just a personal thing.
Yeah. And do you love or hate the smell of insulin?
I'm indifferent, I guess.
Okay.
Just does it, whatever. I always.
No. Some people have strong feelings on it.
Yeah, indifferent.
Okay, that's not a problem. And this one, bit of a curveball. If you were on a desert island and you could take 3 things with you, what would you take? You've already got all your diabetes supplies. So you've already got insulin, meters, sensors, stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be diabetes related.
Oh. Can I take people?
I think that's pushing it a bit far.
Yeah, right. I would take not my phone, but some sort of pen and paper. And I would take a barbell.
Oh.
Pen,
One more thing.
Oh, pen and paper one. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're
And
quite generous.
very what a generous desert island. And so I'm really struggling.
We've had people take biscuits. So if there's a particular food you really like, or music.
Yeah, I was. Oh yeah, I think music. I think we'd have some music. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That is the end of our 90-second questions that probably lasted about 10 minutes. But, we go for it. So the next bit we're going to talk about is just a little bit about your diagnosis story. So sort of what happened? How did you sort of find out that you had type 1? Did you know much about it or anything? Do you want to just tell us a bit about how you were diagnosed?
Yeah, of course. I didn't know much about it. I knew there were. It's the old, same old thing. I knew there were 2 types, even though there are more than 2 types. Now I know, but I thought there were 2 types just before I got diagnosed, which is type 1 and type 2.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know the difference. I didn't even know what diabetes was. I did know you had to inject insulin for one of them, but I didn't know which one, even though I was diagnosed a few years before I was. But she lived by at the time, and I knew she really struggled with it. But again, I didn't really know what it was. So my diagnosis story in Thailand and Bali. So me and my girlfriend, an
exotic start to the story.
Sorry, I should say my fiance now. We got engaged 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we love traveling. We were fortunate enough I was 21, I think she was 20, to go to Thailand and Bali. So we did 3 weeks in Thailand and then a week in Bali.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were in Bali, we stayed near the monkey forest, which was in a place called Ubud. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I remember going into just a local restaurant, and I ordered a surf and turf, something so just wrong. It just didn't taste right.
Oh, not good.
So I spat it out straight away. I still had and during those 7 days, I slowly began to feel more ill. So it didn't hit me straight away. And I've had sunstroke before, and I just thought, it's probably sunstroke. Tried to drink water, but also I kept drinking a lot of beer. Long story short, I was on the plane home. My head started to really, really hurt, like a really bad headache. And I've never really suffered with headaches. On the drive home from London, the 3-hour drive, head was pounding even more and even more. And then over the next 2 days, I started to have a really high temperature, trying to sweat it. Probably go to the doctors. So I went up there and they took one look at my temperature and then sent me to the infectious disease ward in the Heath Hospital in Cardiff.
Oh my God.
So it took them ages to figure out what I had. They started treating me as though I had salmonella, I think. They didn't realise what type it was. It was called salmonella type 2 Java or something, because Java's in sort of Indonesia area.
Yeah.
But it got into my blood, so I had sepsis. So I was on an intravenous line for 6 weeks. And yeah, I was really ill. I remember literally turning my head a millimeter and having this booming headache. It was the worst headache I've ever had. And then for the next year, I slowly started having symptoms of type 1, tired than usual, but I just assumed it was adulthood. And then I do a very, very small amount of work for the fire service, and I had to have a medical. And when I weed into the cup, they found sugar in my urine. And I got a bit embarrassed because I didn't realise sugar was not meant to be in your urine. I literally thought it was from the meal deal I just had. So maybe I shouldn't have had that Lucozade. So I drank loads of water. I had to do the urine test again, and it was clear. And then
And they didn't report that though, or tell
no.
you to go and get it checked.
Nope, they didn't report that. So about 6 months, maybe 5 months later. So I was in my last year of uni, which is relatively stressful anyway. But
Yeah.
like somebody crashed into the back of my car, ripped my car off. I got into an unfortunate altercation, which I won't talk about, but it left me with PTSD. And they believe that was the second trigger then. And then I just had all the usual symptoms. But the weirdest one for me was because I like to train. I was training, as hard as I could, as I would in every session. But I had no pump in my muscles because obviously there was no insulin.
Yeah.
And all my muscles were squidgy, and that's actually what made me go and get myself checked out.
It's amazing, isn't it, how you can think up reasons for all these symptoms, which when you look back on them are quite dramatic.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? You put them down, like you're saying, like, oh, it was my final year of uni. Oh, I was adulthood and it was busy. And I remember exactly the same because my eyesight really went, which was, because of the high sugars. And I'd gone back to uni to do a postgrad course. And I just thought, well, it's because I'm burning the candle at both ends. Plus I'm staring at screens and books the whole day.
Oh, that must have been quite frightening, actually, with the eyesight going.
Yeah. But I just put it down to other things, even though on top of that, like you're saying, I was getting up about 4 times during the night.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember. Do you know the stupid? I say stupid. It wasn't stupid. It was just my lack of knowledge. But I used to drink loads of apple juice and orange juice.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was having my type 1 diabetes symptoms, that's what I was downing. To sort of.
Oh, I can beat that juice.
Oh, go on.
I always used to drink. I've been a Diet Coke. Well, I don't think Pepsi Max was around at the time that I was diagnosed, but Diet Coke fiend for years. And I was starting drinking like litres of liquid. So I thought, I bet it's the saccharin in the Diet Coke. And because I was at like uni, do you know, like you're drinking more during the day, like you go to the Student Union or the coffee bar, and I don't drink tea or coffee, so I'd have a Diet Coke. I thought it's the amount of Diet Coke. So I changed onto full fat.
Oh, no.
To help with the symptoms. And so when you did take yourself to the GP, did they diagnose it then and there, or?
Yeah, well, my partner's a pediatric nurse, so she was training to be a pediatric nurse at the time, and she sort of, I don't know, we went through some symptoms of diabetes. I've always been quite in tune with my body, and I heard about diabetes, so I decided to look at the symptoms. And I actually thought I was type 2, and I was like, oh my days, I cannot believe I've just been eating this rubbish and drinking this rubbish, and I've given myself type 2 diabetes. That was sort of my feeling. And then my girlfriend said at one point, which again probably prompted me to go to the doctors, that my breasts were swelling like pear drops. I had Fresh, which I believe should be. So I had a conversation the other day at VT's Cymru event, and Fresh was brought up by a young person, I forget her name, who did an amazing talk.
Yeah.
And they were saying that should be like one of the 4 T's, so make it a 5 T. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, because I actually had that as well, but I just never really spoke about it. Anyway, so there was that. So all these little things, they all sort of prompted me to go and see if I've got type 2 diabetes. And then turns out I had type 1 diabetes.
Type 1, oh goodness. And how, so were you sent to the hospital from there? And were you admitted or not admitted?
I went to my GP. He did the bloods. I waited, I don't know, 5 days. Then he rang me and he said, you need to come in because we need to check your bloods again. And he did the bloods again to double check. Then rang me again and said, brought me up and then sent me straight to the hospital. So to be fair, they were really good, And
Yeah.
then my nurses are, you know, fantastic, amazing people. Went through everything with me. Were like, I don't know, just I think they were rocked, you know, especially to begin with. They were amazing.
I think that's it, but it's such a lot to take in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. I was quite fortunate when I was diagnosed because my head, whenever, oh, excuse me, whenever something happens in my life, I always see it as like a challenge to begin with. So I was quite focused. I was like, okay, this has happened. It sucks, but it's okay. This is what I'll do. I actually started to eat really well, accepting of my condition for the first 2 weeks. And then it all,
a whole 2 weeks.
well, yeah, honestly, about a week or two, I was quite, you know, quite accepting this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it sounds like you found it quite difficult to start with to accept the changes, because even though people say, oh, you can live a normal life, which we do, but it's a normal life with other things coming along with it that we're forced to do. So it's not quite a normal life.
I don't know, yeah, define a normal life these days.
Yeah.
I don't know, I almost don't like the term you can live a normal life anymore, because that suggests, I mean, again, correct, you know, you might disagree with me, but that suggests you can just go out and still a normal life, or to a lot of people, especially where I grew up, is very much still eating what you want, drinking alcohol or binge drinking, you know. I don't think that should be a normal life, in my opinion. I think you should want to eat well, want to maybe not drink so much. I don't know. Anyway,
I think it's like you say. I suppose it's tongue in cheek when I say a normal life, because like you're saying, what is normal, and all of us have got our own lives, and I'm sure they're very, very different. And I think the thing is, I think there's nothing particularly that I've wanted to do that I couldn't do, but some of it's taken a lot of planning, and at times I've had to delay things because that wasn't the day to do something.
right.
So I suppose I look at it that way, that if I really want, I'll find a way around it, but I'm finding a way around it rather than just being able to do it.
Yeah, okay. I get.
But maybe that's my view on it, you know. It's
it's never stopped me from doing anything. The only thing it stopped me from doing actually was like I wanted to try for the Royal Marines when I was 20. But that was like an ultimatum I gave myself. If I wasn't happy where I was in my life by the time I was 25, I was going to try for the Royal Marines. Obviously, I got diagnosed at 23, so you can't come to the album.
yeah.
So that's the thing.
I'm just going to say, somebody's got the microphone off and there's noise in the background, and I don't think it's coming from your thing. So I don't know if you have got a speech, and if you just turn to mute for a moment, that'd be really appreciated. Thank you. So you were saying you were on injections. Have you ever considered a pump, or are you perfectly happy with how you are, so don't see the point in changing?
At the moment, I'm perfectly with the pen, but I have inquired about a pump because, you know, I do think the technology is just amazing these days. And I'm interested to see if I would be better with a pump. I'm always trying to, you know, you want to look after yourself the best. But to be honest with you, I'm still very much happy with the pen, just because maybe that's just because, you know, it's habitual. But also the thing with a pump for me, I don't really know a huge amount about the pumps, but I do know with at least one of them, you have to change them like every 3 days, right? Is it something like that?
I think most of them with the sets. So if it's like an Omnipod, you have to change that every 3 days. And if you're on a tube pump, you're changing the cannula every 2 to 3 days, depending on the type of cannula.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I do CrossFit, and like it's quite, I don't know. I've just got this thing as like it would just get in the way of my sort of my gym lifestyle type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, not knocking it at all. Maybe I'll try it. We'll see. But at the moment, I'm very happy with the pen.
No, I think it's sort of each to their own in a way. If you're happy and doing okay how you are, why not? I don't think, I know I have a pump and I could extol to you the virtues, I think, of having a pump, but I'm sure other people have, you know, different views to where I'm thinking it's amazing and that. And you do a lot of exercise, don't you? I know this is where our lives definitely differ.
I try to look after myself, but also I do love doing physical challenges, just because, as I said, this comes back to, you know, sort of wanting to reach my full physical potential and just challenge my body and see what my body can do. Not that I've done a huge amount of physical challenges, but yeah, I enjoy sort of testing my physical limits, definitely.
I think you're playing this down a bit, Ju. I have to be honest, because I have been cyber stalking you the last day.
I know.
And I've seen some of the things you've been doing.
Yeah, well,
if your views of all your poetry has gone up significantly on Instagram over the last day or two, it was probably me. But I really enjoyed it, and it is amazing. And we'll get onto that in a little bit. So you're obviously really into sport. How did you sort of initially cope with that? Did you get much advice from your clinic, or was it you trial and error, or how did you manage it?
very good question. I think you know, as I said, the diabetes nurses were amazing, and they did, I believe, talk me through a little bit of sport and maybe, you know, trying to prepare for hypos if I play sport. But I do think it took me a while to understand how my body would react to sport. Now with type 1 diabetes, so the nurses would tell me so much, but I do think it had to be experimented.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, understand what my body, how my body would react to certain high intensity exercise, and how my body would react to maybe more endurance based exercise. And not just initially, but maybe an hour or two afterwards as well. And what sort of level I should really try and get at before I start exercise. So yeah, I think it was definitely trial and error with that.
And when you were doing that, your own cough, because I think you are quite a proactive sort of person, all the things that you're sort of interested in and obviously very passionate about. So was that sort of the self-motivation from yourself to do that experiment, or was it that you know other people with type 1 who exercise, or was advised to go to certain webs, you know, sort of what is it, Run Suite and things like that, the website that gave you an insight into doing that? Or was it just, I need to do this, what have I got to do it?
I think it was that, but I don't think it wasn't like a conscious let's experiment. It was just like, I'm gonna go and train, let's just see what happens type thing. And you know, I definitely did some research to try and understand it a bit better. I've done the Daphne course, and I believe they talked about it through that, but that was quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
But no, I've never really known many people who live with type 1 diabetes that do a lot of exercise locally to me.
Yeah.
So I know one guy actually who I've met the last couple of years who's a powerlifter. So I've had a good chat with him. But yeah, I think it was more just me going for it, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you sort of mentioned with diet and things like that. Are you sort of, when I say experimental with that sounds a bit like you're eating seaweed or something. Not that there's anything wrong with eating seaweed, because people do, and it is very nice. But did it alter the way you thought about fueling your body as well, particularly with your exercise?
Definitely. So in January, for the last couple of years, well, first of all, I always do dry January, and last year I ran only a mile, but I ran a mile every day for January.
Mm-hmm.
That was my challenge last year. So this year I wanted to try something else again, and I stumbled across something called the carnivore diet, which is
Not the carnival diet.
not the carnival singing and dancing diet, no, but the yeah, the carnivore diet.
Sorry, when we were talking before this, I thought he said carnival, as in Notting Hill carnival, and I was like, no, I've never heard of a carnival. But anyway, carry on, Duke.
Yeah. No, I love it. So yeah, I stumbled across that online through a couple of people I follow online, and you know, it's obviously meat based. And I thought, you know what, in January, I've never really experimented with a diet before. I've always just sort of ate relatively well. You know, like everybody, I love a good burger and things like that. I thought, you know what, I'll see what happens, because you know, if I'm not eating any carbs, because it was pretty much carb free. Although I did have one day off a week because I wanted it to try to be a little bit sustainable.
Yeah.
So I did it, number one, to see if I lose a little bit of weight, but number two, to see if it affected my diabetes in a positive way. And for the first week or two, it's obviously quite difficult because your body's so used to burning carbohydrates. It took a little while to begin to, for the body to begin to burn fat. And then when it did, straight away, the first thing I noticed was, like, I usually, when I was waking up before, I would have this bloating feeling in my belly, even though, you know, my belly's empty, and that sort of went. So my belly felt really flat, which was a really cool feeling. My type 1 diabetes, my levels were probably the best they've ever been within the whole month. I didn't crave sugar by about 2.5 weeks in. I started to not crave sugar. You could have put a chocolate bar in front of me and I was very happy just to crack on with my meat.
Wow.
Salt in my meat. You know, there were some slight downsides to it as well. I don't think I ever quite ate enough in any of those days, so I always felt a tiny bit hungry, and that was just, I think that was my fault for not eating enough meat to feel satiated.
So if you're not having carbs, how much meat do you need to eat? Because I've never gone that low a carb at all, but I would imagine it's quite a quantity.
Well, they say to begin with, because your body's not meat, with meat comes fat, so your energy is pretty much fat. They do say just to eat as much until you feel satiated, so that could be quite a lot to begin with. And then as your body adapts, which I didn't give it enough time to do this because I only did it for January because it was just my January challenge. They do say you eventually will probably start eating maybe 2 meals a day, because that's all the body needs. But again, maybe don't take my word for that.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you my experience.
I was just going to say, this is not medical advice or anything.
Yeah,
it's just interesting change and how you found it.
Yeah, definitely. Also, my mind was a lot clearer as well. But yeah, I think the only downsides were that I was a little bit hungry. Again, probably my fault, not eating enough. And then I did have a bit of constipation, but they do say you go through that anyway. Some people like the diarrhea, or you go the other way and get constipated.
Yeah. Vegetables with it, or is that limited as well?
So yes, no vegetables as well.
No.
Bad. Yeah. So basically, the strictest form of the carnivore diet is called the lion diet. So all you do is eat red meat. I didn't do that. I did I did all sorts of meats, including fish, and I also ate eggs, and I also ate cheese.
Oh, okay.
But
So
yeah,
after a month of that, because you were saying your levels were good and you felt quite good, do you think it would have been sustainable for you, or is it something that sort of you're not quite as strict with yourself now, but you've sort of kept some elements of it, but it reintroduced other things?
I've kept some elements of it, so I still eat quite a high quantity of meat. I've incorporated more fruit now because I was lacking in a bit of energy on the diet as well.
Yeah.
But it comes back to the question, you know, of what's living a normal life. So the reason why I've probably not been as strict with it is because of social situation.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It takes a lot of discipline to stick to something like that, and I'm not saying I don't have that. I will be trying it again, but yeah, it was just a lot of social situations. You know, people, you're offered to go out for meals, and then people have a drink.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I feel like
It's got to be livable, though. Is it to be sustainable? It has to be livable.
well, it has to be livable, but then all of your other decisions around that needs to be livable. That's what I'm sort of getting at.
Yeah.
So you need to be like, when your friends are going for a drink, and you don't want to drink, you don't just go, oh yeah, go on, I'll have a
I
drink.
hadn't considered that.
I mean, it's all these things. So if you want to do it, you've got to be disciplined, not just on your diet, but in social environments and stuff like that, and just choose what's best for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, and I suppose it is one of those things that you gave it a go. You're taking bits of it that worked for you, or you think I can put these into my life and live with this. And there is also the fact in today's climate, the cost of it as well, because I would imagine eating meat all the time is quite expensive.
Yes, I would say it was only slightly more expensive than our usual, let's say,
Oh, right.
weekly, monthly shop, because I was only eating meat. I wasn't eating
Yeah.
the other added stuff. I wasn't snacking in the night. I wasn't going out for food.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one. As I said, it's not just, if you want to do something like that, it's a lifestyle change. It's not just, oh, this is my diet for a month. It really
Yeah.
has to incorporate and fit into your lifestyle, and that includes social environments, and that includes as I said, like alcohol, for example. So all these things.
Yeah.
So I would still recommend it for people if they wanted to try it. Like, do your research. Like, I bought the book by Sean called The Carnivore Diet. I did a lot of research before I did the diet. I didn't just see it and think, oh, I'll give that a go. I did my research before I tried it.
No, I think, as long as you're an adult and take it and read up on it and take medical advice if you feel that you need to, or speak to a dietitian or something, just sort of being the responsible.
No, 100%. But I mean, your dietitian will probably say, yeah, don't do that. Your doctor would probably say, don't do that. But
yeah.
I did my own research, and that was enough for me to be like, okay, I will give this a go. And I did I would say Mike's 90% positive.
Yeah. Well, it must have been if you're incorporating some of the things into your life.
Yes.
After the month. So it wasn't like, I don't know, giving up chocolate for Lent.
No.
And then Easter comes. And all of a sudden those Easter eggs are disappearing and doing like that. I'm going to have a bit of a flip of subject, so I hope I don't sound too, well, how can I say it, callous in the way I'm going to bring it in. I know you've been very open about, and I know a lot of your work that I've sort of seen, you're very open about the fact that you live with OCD.
Yes.
Which I have to be honest, I suppose in my own mind, I thought I had an idea what it was. And as I've listened to some things and not done a lot of background reading, I will be honest, but just sort of Googled and whatever, actually isn't what I thought exactly. And I wonder, how does that fit in? Because they don't seem like an ideal match from my understanding, but I could be totally wrong, so I apologise for that.
Well, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is is very, very much a heavily stigmatized and misunderstood mental health condition. They've also now done some research and believe it's
I think that's when I was reading about it, because I always thought, and you've not explained what it is now, so I should be saying this afterwards, but I thought of the obsessive compulsion as the same thing. Right. And then when I was reading about it, it was, no, they're different. Like then it was something like, oh, and that's the bit that I didn't understand. So if you explain that now, because then other people might have a better knowledge than I did.
Yeah, I'll explain it, to the best way I can. And this is the sort of example I usually give. But before I do say this example, there are many types of OCD. You've all probably, I assume, have heard of hygiene OCD. And this is an example that I'll give. People who clean a lot and wash their hands a lot, who have hygiene OCD, the reason why they clean so often and wash their hands so often, sometimes wash their hands so much that their skin begins to bleed, is not because they like things clean. It's due to a fear. So the fear, and I knew somebody who had this fear, who had OCD, when I did my cognitive behavioral group therapy. So her fear was that she was going to get HIV, like anywhere she went. I think she used to work in a hospital as well. So it's an irrational fear, by the way, but it's a fear nonetheless. And yeah, she thought she was going to get HIV, so she would carry antibacterial. She wouldn't shake people's hands because of this. It's the what if. It's the uncertainty. It's like the likelihood of her catching HIV is just completely, it's really, really, it's highly unlikely. But with OCD, it's the what if. Of an OCD, your compulsion then becomes washing your hands all the time, or washing them until you feel like it's okay, and then you get trapped in that vicious cycle. Because in life, and not just with OCD, but in life, we all experience uncertainty, but uncertainty plays a huge part of OCD, and trying to live with that uncertainty without performing compulsions is very difficult. So this is my example. So my example would be when I started having OCD. OCD targets your morals, your values, and things you care about most. So that person was working in a hospital, which means she cared about her job, right? So that's why that probably developed. So my mum was a single mum growing up, and when I was young, about 12 years old, like horrendous intrusive thoughts that she was going to die in a car crash, or she was going to die, and I felt the need to prevent that from happening. So I had a personal thought, then I felt responsibility. So responsibility is tied in with OCD. I felt responsibility on my shoulders. Like, why did I think that thought? That's horrible. I don't want it to happen. I then perform compulsions. So I've got something called pure OCDs, which is one of the types. So my compulsions are mainly in my head for certain intrusive thoughts, and I would pray them over and over again until I felt satisfied that this is never going to happen. And it becomes extremely exhausting, full of anxiety, time consuming. And you're always left with that uncertainty anyway, which is why it traps you in this vicious cycle.
And is that cycle heading into things? I hope you don't mind discussing this. I know you said earlier that you were fine, just to let people know that I've not just barged in on this. You had mentioned that you were all right talking about it. But is it a bit of a, well, when I say self-fulfilling prophecy, it's not really, because it's not fulfilling it. Because you did the compulsion, the obsession you have, you did that compulsion and the obsession didn't. So does that make the compulsion more prominent because it helped the first time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so pretty much I mean, the stop to sort of fight your OCD, or the treatment for it, is to not do your compulsions. So you sit there with the anxiety of thinking you have to do this thing to prevent this horrendous thing from happening. And sitting there with that anxiety is very, very difficult. And people do the compulsions just to feel relief. But then, as I said, you get trapped into... So my OCD also revolves around numbers. So there's an intrusive thoughts on every single number. So I would have to think of a number to perform my compulsions, which I would then be happy with. And that sometimes got to over 50. So other things that I do. So a person with OCD might have a main form, but often does have little bits of other forms. So I've got something called like check-in as well. So, you know, check-in. Sometimes, I forget what this is called. I think it's called hit and run OCD. So in the car, there's been times where I know I've not hit anybody, but I'll go and drive somewhere just in case I had, and I knew I didn't, you know. But again, it's still an OCD. I'm just trying to give you examples. Examples of another compulsion is running up and down my stairs. I've done that like over 100 times, or at least over 70 times before, and it's very tiring, especially when I want to go to bed.
It just it sounds. I mean, I'll be honest. When I was reading about it, it's just so much more than I thought it was, and I didn't think it was trivial before. Do you know what I mean? Because I think everybody, if we're honest, you know about the compulsion side of it. And like you say, people, I suppose what most people think of is washing hands or checking doors and things like that.
But there's always a wide...
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of the obsessive part of it. I thought it was the compulsion. But does this affect you at all around your diabetes, or...
Really quick, people often confuse perfectionism with OCD, even though there's something called symmetry OCD, where people like things in order and like orderliness. That is a type of OCD. But again, it's the reason why they like it. It's because there's an intrusive thought, and if it's not in order, something bad's going to happen. So there's another example I like to give. So you've got two people. You've got a perfectionist and somebody with OCD, and you've got a bookshelf with books, you know, A to Z, and they're all messy. So the perfectionist would look at that shelf and think, "Oh, that doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. Let's would have an intrusive thought like a family member's going to die if you don't organize that to A to Z." Then they would then organize it to A to Z, and that's what makes it OCD. Does that make sense?
That is such a brilliant example. It's such a brilliant example, because and I think that's the way I sort of read it, and you think, oh, you know, sort of, oh, that's my OCD, which, apologies for using it like that. But when I was reading about it, like you're saying, I was thinking, no, it's not. It's just that's how I like things.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a fine line, I guess, but
oh no, but I do it because that's how I like it, not because I'm forced to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And doing that, and does it play into your diabetes, or?
Oh, it did really bad, yeah. Because
I'm sort of thinking there's so many things that you need to do for diabetes.
Oh, excuse me. Well, yeah, you know, I'm looking at my insulin pen now, and you know, there's numbers. So
yeah,
I've got an intrusive thought with most numbers. So it took me a long time to be able to inject, for example, the number 6 into me, because I would associate that with an intrusive thought, which I'm not, you know, I'm not going to tell you what.
No.
But then I'd feel like, I don't know, or it could be like the number 4, and then when that injection's in me, it's like I felt like it was, I felt like, you know, something bad was either in me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Then I'd either, so let's say I needed to inject 7 units, I'd either inject 5 or inject 10. This is just an example. And it was very rare that I'd inject more, because then I'd obviously have to go and find something to eat. But yeah, it massively did play a part. Or often I would, the first sort of year or two, I just neglect my instincts. It was just too challenging for me.
Too much associated with doing that.
Yeah, and it became very difficult. And also the needle. So I've often put the needle in and had an intrusive thought as I've done it, and then I'd have to, like, 20 is usually a good number for me. So then I'd stab myself with a needle 20 times before I could then crack on with my day. So it's stuff like that that's, affected me with diabetes.
And the thing is with diabetes, things related to diabetes and mental health, like with eating disorders and, different behavioural burnout and things like that, there's no choice in that we have to do those things. So even though you can have bad associations with something, it's not like you can stop doing it, which adds an extra dimension. And it's sort of like, again, with my, that's the way I like things. And this is another one, and it's not because of intrusive thoughts, and it's not because of OCD. But I had for years, if I put carbs in, it would never end with a 0. So I put 29 in or 31. I'd never put 30.
Right.
And I have no reason for that, apart from my logic was that it's a guesstimate, and what are the chances of it happening on a whole number?
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
But it wasn't an intrusive thought or anything. It was just do you know what I mean? What are the chances that it actually would be 30?
It is a guessing game, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's it. And when I was reading about it, I was thinking, oh no, this is so. Oh goodness. And so you've obviously still have OCD and live with OCD, but is with your poetry, which we haven't actually spoken that much about, which we really have got to get onto now. Does that help you? Because I know I was reading where you said that the poetry sort of helped you because it gave you a place for expression and getting these thoughts out.
Definitely. So I started writing poetry, poetry and raps. In my old lyric book, I always like to say, when I was about 11, and then 12, 13 years old, I started to experience, obsessive compulsive disorder. So even though I was inspired by hip hop artist stuff, which is why I started writing, because I just thought it was really cool and just a way of expression anyway. From a very young age, I started writing about exactly how OCD was making me feel. And because I didn't want to tell anybody at such a young age, tell them that, I have this intrusive thought and feel like I have to do this, afraid of stigma, afraid of people thinking I was crazy. I was able to articulate myself through the pen. My brain told my hand told the pen told the page, and I was able to feel relief. I was able to feel some sort of release from this super glued, manipulative grip OCD had on my brain. And it took me a long time to actually show people my work. So I eventually showed my family, some of my close friends as I started to get older, and then got with my now fiance, Dean, and then showed her and stuff. But I didn't actually share the world my poetry till I was 25.
Oh wow, that long?
Yeah, it took me a long time, to be honest with you.
Is that because it's so personal to you? Like it's like getting undressed in public? Oh, Jukes, you've gone on mute.
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, it was really, obviously it was very personal. It was, I was vulnerable. Like when I grew up in school, I was always the sporty guy. Everybody knew me in school. Until my early 20s, I was the sports person. I was good. I was a decent rugby player. I used to run the 400 meters, and I was, yeah, as I said, I was always the sports guy, and I always used to put on this. When I look back now, definitely I wouldn't say facade, but try and show people that I was this sort of young, tough guy, and I, you know, had my head on my shoulders when really I was struggling like mad with OCD and a lot of. Yeah, well, I didn't ever want to be seen as weak, because I didn't then want to get, you know, picked on, or I didn't want to get to any fights. I wanted people to know that I was strong, and, you know, as I said, I played a lot of sport, so I always had some sort of respect for playing sport, and that meant a lot to me growing up. So yeah, I think it was maybe, you know, adulthood, and then living with type 1 diabetes when I was 23. All those things, you start to learn more about yourself, and you allow yourself to be more vulnerable and open. And I think that's probably what eventually led me to going, do you know what, I'm going to go for this. But I was in Zambia for 6 weeks the year I got diagnosed. So my undergrad degree was sports coaching. That led on my 3rd year through the university, Cardiff Metropolitan, and I think 8 to 9 or 10 other universities go out to Zambia every year to do volunteering, and I was fortunate enough to get that role. And you know, I worked with some very underprivileged children and coached them in various different sports, and it was just such a life-changing and eye-opening experience. And I was out there with this guy called JP, who's still out there now, actually, very much heavily involved in the program still. And he was then doing a master's in international development, and I just finished my uni degree. I was a personal trainer at the time, but I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I just asked him, you know, if you do a master's degree, that's usually what you want to do with your life. And I just asked him the question, how did you decide that's what you wanted to do? And he said he asked himself 2 things. What does he love, and what makes him get out of bed in the morning? He said he loves playing basketball because he was a really good basketball player, but what made him get out of bed in the morning was making a positive impact in people's lives. So I just did the exact same. I asked myself the same things. You know, I loved coaching. I did love sport, but what actually makes me get out of bed in the morning, and still does to this day, is making a positive impact through my poetry and through my words and through my raps and through my music. So I decided then, a year later, to set up my Instagram and start sharing my work. Oh, I was 24, sorry, not 25. But yeah.
Oh no, and it is amazing. I know at TAD you did a couple of your poems raps, and I still remember the one on Jesse Owen.
Oh yeah.
Which it always amazes me, because a little family history here. My dad went to the Olympics when it was in London, just after the war.
Wow.
And he saw Jesse Owen.
That's amazing.
He went on a school trip, whatever. And I don't know how long I knew ago, but I've known it quite well, because whenever the Olympics was on, Dad would say. And so when you said that, do you know, like, there was a connection? Well, there was a connection anyway, because he was an amazing man and what he did, and at that time and everything. But it really hit me. And I think a lot of your poems that I've heard, they are just so, they get to the nitty gritty of something, but in a not a roundabout way. I'm not you can see why I'm not an art critic. but you there's usually a theme or a social construct or something behind a lot of your work. Do you sort of feel that, or am I picking up the wrong thing, that there's a message there?
Yeah, I like to write. You know, everything I write always has to have a meaning. Or you know, I'm trying to raise awareness of something, or trying to be thought provocative or impactful. Yeah, everything always has to be, there's a meaning for each piece that I do, type thing.
Yeah,
Definitely.
well,
I'm really sorry, can I Can we have
I was going to say, having spoken about your poetry, have you got one that you could do for us?
I do, but can I have a quick toilet break really quick?
Of course you can.
All right, I will.
Go away, and I will chat with Tom and
With
whatever
me.
until you
You know what?
return.
Lovely.
So shout when you return.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic chat so
Tom,
far. Hello,
are
hello,
you
hello.
there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Or Claire? I'm here.
Can,
Hiya. I'm hoping
can,
you
you, can you hear me?
Yes, can now.
I think it's sorry. I unmuted the microphone. I think. I think it's been a really powerful chat. I've really.
It's an amazing chat. There's so much we could talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm so interested in so much. And I hope he didn't feel I was prying when we were talking about the OCD, but he said he didn't mind. When I started reading about it, it was just I had no idea.
He's a great advocate, isn't he? Not only for diabetes, but for mental health and conditions like OCD, and it's really speaks volume for him to come on and feel comfortable to share it. And like say, he is, and great. There's so many things he was saying, and I was nodding away, and I'm not just saying this, but I was like, oh my gosh, that I have signs of that. And my wife and some close friends have said they believe I have OCD, and like simple things like the door thing, the run up and down stairs, and the Duke, if you're there, I don't know, but the hit and run OCD element, I've had that thought where I'm driving and then I have to drive back to the place because I thought, have I just hit someone? And I know I haven't, and it's wow, I have had them sensations, them feelings, and it's really interesting. And it was interesting hearing about the diabetes element, of course, as well.
Yeah, it was just with the like I said to you, I sound a bit obsessed, but it was just that I was sort of reading about it, just so that I had, do you know, like a little bit of a background knowledge. And I just thought, I have no idea about this at all. I didn't, and it made me think a bit like we say, oh, people just don't know anything about diabetes. Well, I knew nothing about it until I was diagnosed.
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was more than one type. Had no idea.
Yeah, 100%, isn't it?
And I was thinking, God, how often in a conversation, and I'm as guilty as the next person, does somebody mention OCD or you mention OCD just because there's a habit or a tick or something like that? And then that's not it at all.
And that's where we've had so many great chats on Diabetes Chat, haven't we? Of course, looking at people's stories of journeys and when they were diagnosed and mental health and peer support and all them sort of things. But we've then gone in deeper to look at like tonight OCD and ADHD and I'm trying to think now, menopause and very, very important things. It's just great to have Duke who can share. That's appreciated. I don't know if he's back from the toilet because you don't want to be hearing my voice, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tom.
No, honestly, mate, it's been really, really powerful chat, and we've had some messages come through. I just want to read it if I can get it. My laptop is really playing up tonight. It's really slow, and I can't like keep up. Dan says, just found your Instagram. Love the cost of living one. Belinda says, I would imagine live with OCD and type 1. It can be beyond unrelenting. I imagine it would be very debilitating, exhausting, and today's Diabetes Chat is a must listen for clinicians supporting people with diabetes. Absolutely. And we had a couple more as well. Definitely thank you, Duke, for your openness and sharing. Look forward to hearing your work, and I think Philippa was going on to that to kind of finish the end of tonight, really, because
we're overrunning as we always do.
I feel you know what I mean. I could listen in and talk for hours and hours and hours. But anyway, I'll hand back to Philippa.
And I think what people are saying, I think they will do like I did you. I went on your Instagram and was just listening to a couple of things, and I spent most of the day listening to your stuff. It is amazing. So if you would like to do some of your spoken poetry, we would love to hear it.
No, that's really kind. Thank you very much. Yeah, Tom, just really quickly, thank you also for
Go for it.
Thank you also for for sharing that. I was here and I did hear and I was listening. And my DMs are always open. So if you need a chat about it,
yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. I think something I'll definitely follow up and we can have a chat. I didn't like, you know what I mean? I've heard of bits of OCD and had my sort of assumptions and stuff, but there's so many relatable things there. And I'm not just saying that, I swear down, I totally have been in positions and still have them sort of things that you mentioned. So yeah, honestly, great for sharing and your openness. And I hope other people have taken away something from tonight, learned more stuff. So nice one. Anyway, back to you, my friend. You please share your awesome poems with us. What are you going to go for?
well, I will go for I'll actually go for a poem called Poetry and Rhyme to begin with. And that is that's about my story with OCD actually, and then I'll do a diabetes piece. Is that, if that's all right?
Sounds fantastic.
All right then. Sorry, just closing my door. So yeah, okay. So this is Poetry and Rhyme. I've scribbled bad thoughts in my notebook. From a young age, I've been feeling broken. Look, I'm riddled with disorder. Everybody thinks OCD is order. That I label things A to Z color-coded, but I'm overloaded mentally with daily torture. You see, it stops at C because he's a beast. The beauty in my mind's deceased, this anxiety, trauma, being a bad thought, hoarder. And it's back again, so I turn to the drink, it becomes my water. And that's a turn of phrase as I open up the tinny, OCD squirms in rage. But when will I learn temporary fixes, it ain't worth the pain. It opens up a can of worms. I try to wriggle out the riddles, but I'm dazed. I need some support to fight, see. Should I go Martin or Malcolm? Can you tell me, Spike Lee? Maybe Black Panther's the answer. I drink vibranium to fix my cranium. Chadwick, rest in high peace. Mum gave me some of her black magic. Said, listen, son, never lose yourself. Mental health will appear like a hat rabbit, bad habit. I don't need to feel like Harry will solve Tom Riddle. I'll attack, stab it with my pen, because you could cut me open, I bleed ink. Mine's been broken, I needed to rethink. I'm married to the pen, the ring binds to the page, because poetry and rhyme saved my life. Pen is sharper than a blade. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's amazing.
And then I will do...
Incredible. Flipper, where's your round of applause jingle?
I was
Come
waiting
on.
till after the second one as well.
Absolutely.
So I've got a short poem about type 1 diabetes, and then I'll do another one if that's all right to round that off. So this is the beginning of my poem called Bittersweet, and it goes like this. They say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Bitter, sweet. I think about this lemon phrase as I penetrate just below my belly button waist height. The needle thin pierces into my skin. I self-medicate insulin so I do not waste away from DKA. Most days my mellow brain interrogates my pancreas. Why are you refusing to do your duty? Answer me. My hands are up. An understanding I may never gain, but to be alive in this life within 100 years insulin was developed, hey, what are the chances? If I was going to get T1D, I guess it's good I got it now. I mean, it's easier to treat. Bitter, sweet. Thank you very much.
I hope I timed that right, Tom.
Perfect. Amazing.
That's
Thank you, Duke.
amazing.
And then this is a more recent poem. This is one I've written this year. It's called Perfect Part 2. Perfect Part 1 is actually in my book, Bittersweet. But yeah, this one I've written this year. And I wrote it after the TAD event. And it goes like this. This one's a tiny bit longer, just to warn the listeners. Perfect. Trying to be perfect is like running on a glass bridge with metal spikes, walking on a frozen lake with no ice, tiptoeing on a tightrope from a high height. Trying to be perfect is like a relentless fight, shadow boxing against my mind. I've boxed up doubt. I fear if I let it out, I will live in my shadow of me, myself. It's complicated, this fight against my health. Trying to be perfect is on the edge of failure. On the edge of failure is self-punishment. On the edge of self-punishment is self-destruction. On the edge of self-destruction is imperfection. A cycle of nothing but stress. Nothing but putting pressure on myself to only feel worth less. But is being perfect worth stress? Tormenting thoughts. I'm in a continuous war. With no warning they spawn, I try to ignore them, they take a new form. I sit and I draw up all the conclusions. If the thought actually forms, I'm having withdrawals. Compulsions, I mourn, I'm shattered, I yawn, I'm battered, I'm worn. Bags live under my eyes, it's as if somebody is gripping, somebody is ripping my stomach. My body is torn. I grip my teeth. I cannot be besides myself because that means I'll be the shadow, then OCD's won. I need to inject, but the numbers are wrong. How can I go on? Do I inject? Too little, too many, neglect, nothing's perfect, I'm gone. Obsession, injection, compulsion, injection, bad number, rejection, obsession, rejection, compulsion, injection, perfection. I'm testing, I'm checking. Is it between the 4 and the 7? Bad number, rejection, bad number, rejection, bad number, neglect, bad number, eject, high blood, forget, bad thought, upset, bad head, feel dead, no tears, are shed, I'm numb, imperfect, I'm numb, imperfect. Wait, what did I say? What if I made the word appear different, a slightly different shape? Then my perspective might change. Put an apostrophe in between the I and M, then just add a space. What does it say? I'm perfect in my own imperfect way. This gift, do I deserve it? To use rhymes to articulate how my body, my brain, my heart feels. God gave me this gift as my escape. When I write things down, my endorphins are doing cartwheels. It is the powerful way I communicate. Maybe God gave me this gift to also help others. Maybe I needed to have suffered, to pick up the pen and empty bad thoughts from my brain so others relate and it soothes their pain, because I'm obsessed with words. I'm blessed, not cursed. These conditions are my test on earth. OCD, or the checks I'm urged. To complete. When I'm wrecked, I turn to T1D, or the checks I'm urged. To complete. A relentless surge of energy, but through stress I've learned to accept my terms. Not had a rest since birth, but I won't rest till I'm dead in the dirt. Forget these nerves. I'm going to work on myself as I set my goals and write these notes. Before I'm ghost, I'm going to be the best person I can be. Forget perfection. I'm just going to be the best version of me. Thank you very much.
That was amazing, Duke. I really, really do love your poetry and things like that. Do you do live performances often?
I do them relatively often, yeah.
But I suppose in your neck of the woods.
I've got a couple coming up in London actually in October.
You'll have to let us know.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Really, really incredible. So
Yeah.
powerful. And you could just hear every word came with such emotion and
There's feeling in every word.
Yeah, and experience, lived experience of you've like worn that t-shirt and how you articulate it. It's just perfection, my friend. And I'll be listening back to it, and I could just relate to it. Loved it, and it was powerful message, and great stuff. Honestly, like I can't sum it up like you, man. But it was just great. It was great.
I know it's how to feel really inarticulate in a conversation or a chat. But I'd really like to thank you for doing the chat tonight. It's been amazing, and I know there's whole areas that I would love to chatted to you about, because I know when we had a bit of a chat before this, there's so much work with different groups of people, and that is just amazing as well. And I think one of the things, a quote from you that I thought was just really nice that I saw today in an article you'd written, and I think it is so true. And you said, I create to relate. And I think that's the thing, that your things are so relatable. And even though some of the subjects I haven't experienced myself, I feel connected to them. So thank you so much. I hope at some point we get to bump into each other again. I hope to be able to see you perform again. But thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. It's been really it's been a lovely evening actually, and thank you to everybody who's listened. I appreciate you coming in to listening in to little old me, and I hope you enjoyed the poetry. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.